Hello to everybody. I'm very glad that I have an opportunity to introduce our case study of a Landsat project in Latvia in such a broad audience. And yeah, I will just go straight in it since I hope you have already heard about Landsat project. So it's also was mentioned in a program, and so it is an Interreg project and Interreg Baltic Sea region project, and we have different case studies which will be also introduced here later today. And I'm representing Latvian case study in southwestern Kurzeme, which was aiming to develop spatial solutions for balancing national interests of offshore wind energy with interests of local communities in preserving landscape qualities and boosting coastal tourism and recreation. And the main output of this case study was supposed to be strategic solutions, how to balance these different interests. And this is our case study area. It includes a terrestrial part up to 10 kilometers from the shoreline and the shoreline itself, and marine part, which is all the adjacent territorial waters and exclusive economic zone, and covering this part of Latvia, starting from border with Lithuania, and actually the whole coastline of now recently established new municipality of South Kurzeme. And the process of the case study is how we implemented it, illustrated in this scheme. And so it was quite a comprehensive process, starting with stock taking stage, which included also interviews with municipalities, analysis of different policy documents and background information, and so also a parallel study contracted by ministry on coastal visitors and infrastructure for recreation in coastal areas. And then we had the two main blocks of the study, which was implemented by us, Baltic Environmental Forum. And so one was focusing on biophysical mapping and assessment of landscape qualities and ecosystem services, which we have placed as in center of our case study area as the main topic what we investigated. And this mapping was carried out by experts of Baltic Environmental Forum, and so included identification of landscape units as a basis for assessment, and then carrying out field works on the land and also from the sea, assessing landscape qualities, and then also assessing different spatial data and information, and with the aim to assess these different landscape qualities and ecosystem service supply of the coastal areas. And in parallel to this biophysical mapping, we had also intensive stakeholder engagement, which was happening through different stakeholder workshops, online surveys, and different communication, which I will introduce also more in detail in the coming slides of the presentation. And so these two major blocks were contributing mostly to the stock taking and assessment for understanding the situation in our case study area, and all the results from this assessment was finally aggregated in a Landsat Map Explorer, which was developed as a publicly accessible online map explorer, where all these results and a huge set of mapping results was available for our stakeholders and participants of this process. And so we used also this Landsat Map Explorer later in the stage of scenario building on how to balance this offshore wind energy and tourism interests, and also for assessment of the scenario impacts, and finally development of optimum spatial solutions as a result of this case study. And also the results of all these following stages were also included in this Landsat Map Explorer. Here is some illustration of how we were exploring Landsat interactions in the field and together with stakeholders and interactive process. And now coming to some major results. So this is this biophysical part, mostly the expert work, where we were assessing this different qualities of our coastal area. And so we were dividing this assessment for like 3 major blocks. Terrestrial part, which this from the coastline to 10 kilometers inland, where we have identified 55 landscape units, and within these units we assessed the list of landscape qualities and ecosystem services in each unit. And then we had a special attention to the shoreline, because this is this interaction zone between marine and coast, and where this also the impacts of offshore wind energy would be most explicit. And so here we mostly concentrated on this assessment of these landscape qualities. And we had also a marine part where we identified also some more larger seascape units, in which we were assessing ecosystem service supply, also which we used for later assessing impacts of scenarios. So, but these are more this biophysical data and expert assessment, but now coming to the stakeholder engagement. So here is a mapping of all the relevant stakeholders in addressing these Landsat interaction issues and governance, so which includes different sectors, not only marine related, but like also fishery, energy, tourism, nature, cultural heritage, forestry, agriculture, all different kind of sectors, and also all different kind of institutions covering from national to subnational to local level. And in practice, all this sectors and these different levels were engaged in our stakeholder involvement activities. And here are some examples or illustrations how we were engaging stakeholders. So in total, we had 3 stakeholder workshops. At the first workshop, we were discussing different challenges of Landsat interaction, in finding out what issues and what stakeholders are concerned, also in relation to this potential offshore wind parks. But at the same time, we also involved them in this landscape assessment. We have developed special ArcGIS web applications and divided the participants in groups and allowed them to assess our landscape units, which we have identified, to assess them in relation to 4 landscape qualities like diversity, scenic views, attractive landscape elements, and uniqueness. And through this exercise, so they gain more understanding and knowledge about this approach and landscape qualities as such. And at the same time, it also helped us for verification of our expert judgment and collection of local knowledge. Another exercise for stakeholder involvement was participatory GIS for mapping recreational sites, or sites important for recreation and tourism. And for that, we have also developed ArcGIS survey using this survey 123. And so we tested this survey also at our first stakeholder workshop, but then we also released it through social media to wider, in general, to anyone who is ready to contribute. And in total, we collected 80 sites significant for recreation and tourism in this our case study area, and also with information about for what kind of recreational activities these sites are suitable. And so further on, we also were engaging stakeholders in formulation of the objectives of our spatial strategic solutions. So in general, the overall aim was to balance the interests of offshore wind energy and recreation and tourism. But so we wanted to formulate this objective precisely how we and our stakeholders understand this direction where we want to go. And so we made it in an online questionnaire, some 34 statements asking if the respondents agree or disagree with that, and yeah, collecting the responses. So this survey was distributed directly to this group of stakeholders which were actively engaged in our case study, and so we collected 31 responses, and yeah, which helped us to clarify the objective of the case study. So it is briefly formulated here. So the overall objective is to support the sustainable development of coastal area by balancing these two interests of offshore wind energy and tourism. And through this, together with stakeholders, we have formulated it, and also in the way that it means to maintain the landscape and environmental qualities as essential resource for development of coastal area, also to improve the tourism infrastructure for boosting the tourism in this area, but also for good quality of life of local people, and also for reducing anthropogenic pressure to the nature values. And then also, yeah, through this objective we want to enable to achievement of EU and national climate policy objectives for providing opportunities for offshore wind energy production, but that they should be located outside of areas of high ecological and landscape value. Yeah, and then as a next step was this development of scenarios, how to achieve this objective, which we have jointly defined. So we use this method of target seeking scenario method for finding. So we have this predefined objective, and we looked for different pathways how to achieve this objective, and that we were doing at our second stakeholder workshop, and where we had 4 groups of participants, which each elaborated its own scenario, 4 alternative pathways how to reach this objective, and focusing on targets of offshore wind energy development for 2050. So there is estimates that by that time Latvia should be able to produce in offshore areas 2.9 gigawatts of, it should have a capacity of offshore wind parks of 2.9 gigawatts, and so we were looking for a space suitable for production of this, for having this capacity of offshore wind energy, but at the same time looking that it, to avoid negative impacts on landscape and other assets what we have there. And for that we used also this our Landsat Map Explorer, which had all these assessment results, and so each group defined its preferred locations and also discussed the tourism development potentials in relation to that. And also during that workshop we had some kind of intuitive assessment of the scenarios by stakeholders, but later we did more in-depth impact assessment of each proposed scenario in relation to ecosystem qualities and service supply. So we were assessing each location of proposed location of offshore wind park in relation to what kind of benthic habitats it would impact, what in relation to that what might be the loss of ecosystem functions and services, and finally how it impacts human well-being. And in also to clarify more this well-being aspect, we had carried out a nationwide social public survey with a nationally representative sample, 2,000 respondents, to assess actually how this our case study area contributes, or it's coastal ecosystems of this case study area contributes to human well-being from national perspective, from all inhabitants of Latvia. And it also had in this group of respondents, there were 90 local inhabitants, but the others were covering all part of other country, our country. And yeah, there were different kind of questions in relation to ecosystem services and well-being. So, but the most important was, yeah, for us to define how the importance of this area for human well-being. And so what here are these main results showing that mostly valued is its contribution to leisure activities, but also to just to happiness about existence of nature, and also health and life satisfaction. And for example, less important people see material contribution to material living standards or some social relations or educational aspects. And yeah, so finally, based on all these results, we in our expert group were developing this strategic solutions or optimum solutions, how to balance this offshore wind energy interests with local interests for preserving landscape and yeah, developing tourism. And so we developed optimum solutions for offshore wind energy based on this national and international policy targets, also based on this scenarios or options proposed by within our stakeholder workshop, and the results of assessing their impacts to different ecosystem features, and also respecting what is envisaged in our maritime spatial plan for 2030 and other technical suitability conditions. And so we have two optimums, like two optimum scenarios. So optimum 2030, it is therefore the most suitable location, actually, what we see for offshore wind park development from all different kind of aspects. So it's here next to Lithuanian border. Even so, it's actually one of the areas in some kind of potential discussion, but actually somehow there are more demands for other allocations, but we really see that this would be the most suitable one, because it would provide 800 megawatts capacity of energy capacity, which would be suitable for meeting the targets for 2030, sufficient for meeting targets of 2030. And also it is located within this area already designated in our maritime spatial plan for potential offshore wind parks, and it has a connection to envisage the electricity cable corridor, and also it is overlapping with 3 out of the 4 scenarios proposed by stakeholders, and has least impact on different ecosystem features, and also almost no negative impact on landscape. Another optimum is for 2050. So here we were looking how, and together with this area already defined for 2030, how to come to this objective of 2.9 gigawatts of capacity. So we looked for additional locations from those proposed in our stakeholder scenarios, and having least impacts to ecosystem and landscape. However, here the situation is not so fortunate as with this optimum 2030, because although it has relatively low impact to different ecosystem features like reefs and fish, but partly it overlaps with important bird areas, and also might have a negative impact to landscape. So that was solutions for offshore energy development, and then we also proposed some solutions for tourism development based on our also ecosystem service assessment results, and particularly cultural ecosystem services illustrated through this main landscape qualities. And so we, based on this assessment results, we have identified some 3 clusters of areas. So in our this coastal part, which is are those with which are most highest rated in relation to aesthetic values. Those with the highest values with regard to naturalness, and then for cultural heritage, some areas are overlapping and belonging to several of these clusters. And then we were developing recommendations how to, in which way to develop tourism in each of these areas or clusters by respecting the particular values what is highly assessed as on high value at these areas. And in cases the area is at the same time highly valued by different of these 3 aspects, then we give a priority to naturalness, maintaining of naturalness values, and followed by cultural heritage and then aesthetic value. And so this is another output, and all these outputs are placed in our Landsat Map Explorer, including this different kind of assessment of ecosystem services and landscape qualities, and also including all the solutions proposed in our case study. And now coming a little bit from the perspective of this multi-level governance, what was in general was the very main output of our project. This process of multi-level governance in relation to Landsat interactions. So the different stages, how our aspects, how it can be addressed. So our case study was looking at this first 3 blocks of scoping, stock taking, and assessment, and looking for solutions. However, we do not reach the stages of implementation and evaluation and learning process. But since it was not a part of formal planning, but it was a pilot case study, more exploratory case study of proposing solutions, but nevertheless we see that it has a potential for uptake also in a more formal planning processes, like it can be. So as all these results are available in our map explorers, they can be used for this newly established Anda Ruskule municipality in strategic planning of the coastal areas. And the methods what we have developed or tested for landscape and ecosystem service assessment are also replicable to other parts of the country at regional scale, or also potentially on the national scale can be. And it can be, in the case of Latvia, this can be this process be implemented through integrating it into thematic planning documents for different levels. And we also see that these methods, particularly what is in relation to this offshore wind impacts of offshore wind park developments, can be also applicable at the Baltic Sea region level and for maritime spatial planning or strategic environmental assessment. And there we can use this potential that we have a harmonized data sets on the marine ecosystem components compiled at Helcom Map and Data Service, which can be basis for a more harmonized way of common exercise of such impact assessments on the Baltic Sea region scale. Yeah, thank you very much. And if you have some questions, I would be happy to answer.